thank you so much for joining us. In this particular workshop, you are going to learn about how you can pass a security audit or what it takes to pass a security audit. This security audit can be from the perspective of compliance, can be from the perspective of for your customer, for security verification as a vendor, etc.
Right.
We have with us Shilendra Singh, who is the security director for Numetric, India's premier cybersecurity organization. Shailendra sir, the stage is yours.
All right. Thanks, Nikhil. So the topic is how to pass a security audit. The whole field of security audit has been becoming quite relevant, quite urgent, quite critical in recent times, given that so many security breaches keep happening, and which is also something that is causing the regulatory bodies to stand up and take note of the poor cybersecurity situation a vast majority of the organizations. In addition to that, the change that I have seen globally is the fact that clients have started becoming quite a bit of a more focused on conducting security audits on their suppliers, which is assuming that if you're building an organization that, let's say, provides a cloud-based SaaS, they will be conducting a security audit on you. So the whole field of security audits is quite distributed. There are various perspectives, various requirements, various levers on which the multiple stakeholders work on, and that is exactly what we'll be covering in this session. Now, before we actually get started with the session, about 40 minutes I'll be talking on the various aspects of security audit, and then we will handle any questions and answers that may come up based on the content of the presentation. So having said that, the very first thing is the purpose of this workshop. These are the things that I wanted to talk about and explain to the audience as to the various aspects related to security audit. One is that to understand what exactly is a security audit, because security audit means different things to different people depending on what is their position, what is their role, what are their expectations and needs. But then it is better that whoever is being involved with the security audit, whether they are requesters or whether they are responders, whether they are implementers, whether they are certifying bodies, they all understand the entire gamut of activities and the range of aspects that they need to focus on. So talk about security audit in general to begin with. Then we will go on to the specifics, like what are the purposes of the audits. There are various factors and levers, as I mentioned earlier, why security audits are conducted. It also depends on what is the role you are playing in a security audit. Then possible sources of requirements. And what I mean by this is security audits are usually something that encompass the entire organization, and it is very difficult to have kind of a security audit conducted unless and until first of all we have some kind of a requirement checklist. And this is something that was covered in a previous workshop as to how do checklists matter when it comes to security. This is just building up on that aspect. The next is we'll cover the various types of audits. Now there are purposes of audits related to them, there are types of audit. We'll get into the specifics later on, but then the types of audit depend on, again, where exactly do you stand, what is the view of the security audit that you have, and what is the role that you got to play. Then the second two most important aspects of this workshop, which is how do you prepare for success in an audit, and what are the key reasons why you're likely to fail in an audit. First is the purpose of security audit. So there are multiple purposes. I'll go through each one of them one by one, but the first and foremost is to identify the gaps and weaknesses in your organization. Now, this could be across the same three aspects that came up earlier, which is technical aspects, physical aspects, or administrative aspects, which can be translated into gaps or weaknesses in your systems, in your processes, or in your people. Um, when you undergo a security audit, if you pick up any standard or any framework for conducting the security audit, that becomes kind of your reference checklist. You will see that there are categories or groupings of the various aspects that are expected to be tested when the security audit is conducted, and they usually are grouped into these three, which is system, processes, or people. Right. Having said that, the next purpose of a security audit is at a high level or maybe even at a lower level to identify the security posture of your organization. How good is your security? Is it reliable? Will it hold up to any kind of an attack, whether it is social engineering attack or whether it is a security breach that is being happening, or let's say business email compromise. Are your logical access controls good enough that they cannot be compromised easily? So that is one purpose of it, of a security audit, which is to identify how good and reliable your security is. The next aspect is more so from a compliance point of view, that if let's say you are undergoing audit based on a certain standard, and maybe you're targeting to get yourself certified in that standard, or maybe you are trying to evaluate yourself whether you measure up to those standards or not, or maybe you're using that standard as your reference framework. So you will end up comparing what are the expectations of the standard versus what exactly are you doing and what else should be done, identifying those gaps and weaknesses, and then take up, like, prepare an action item list that, okay, these are the things that need to be done to meet the expectations of the standard or the framework, right? And then finally, there are various stakeholders, internal stakeholders. Your senior management is your stakeholder, and when I say senior management, I'm referring to the non-security senior management. Let's say if you are the CISO of your organization, your CEO is your primary stakeholder, your CFO, your revenue officer, your even your chief people officer. They're all stakeholders, because if you fail to meet their expectations in terms of security, ultimately they will also face an impact. Besides that, there are uh, additional expectations from these stakeholders in terms of not doing excessive amount of work, in terms of security, because even that is a thing, in the sense that you could not only do less than what is necessary to boost your level of security to what is necessary, you may also end up doing more than what is necessary, right? The ideal case is you define what exactly is the security posture you're targeting for your organization. Now, this can be done through various ways, such as risk assessment, or maybe you can prepare a list of information security objectives that you want your organization to achieve. With in relation to those objectives, you can end up preparing a list of metrics that different functions within your organization need to follow. So what you end up doing is that you start with these objectives, and then you start defining metrics that are kind of realistically achievable. We all know the concept of smart goals. Similarly, your security metrics should be evaluated against the smart standard as well, right? And that is where this last aspect comes in, that you not only meet the needs of your stakeholders from the point of view that what do they really need, am I meeting those or not, but also am I asking too much of them, right? And this is more so about your internal stakeholders. The exact opposite kind of thing happens when you're talking about external stakeholders. And external stakeholders could be your certifying body, it could be your clients, it could be the governmental regulatory bodies. What usually tends to happen is that their expectations are usually not be possible to be met to the best extent possible, or rather to the extent that they expect from you. And the reason for that is because they will always expect the highest levels of security, but then you will have your budget constraints, your resource constraints, and you possibly will have to negotiate and bargain with them that, okay, I can achieve this level of security for you, and anything beyond that is something that is beyond my reach. So it will mean that in that case, it is about meeting their expectations to a level of satisfaction that they are happy with you, right? So this is another purpose of security audits. Finally, the uh, overall purpose of security audit is ultimately decided internally by you, assuming that you are from the security function, or you are someone who has been given the responsibility of the security function. Maybe you are the CTO, maybe you are the CEO, maybe you are someone who's from the DevOps function, but you have been given the responsibility of boosting up security because your organization, for example, does not really have a security team of its own at this point in time. So in that case, what you do is that you account for all of the various purposes that um, that were stated earlier. You put them all together, and then you decide that what exactly are the requirements of security for my organization, and they can be based on these factors, which is regulatory or legal mandates, meaning there are laws that are applicable to you, and you have no choice but to adhere to them. Now, example being, let's say if your organization is serving the EU, then in that case EU GDPR automatically applies to you. If let's say you are in the healthcare space, then HIPAA regulation applies to you. If let's say you are a communication service provider, then in that case, TRI regulations apply to you. So you decide that what are the laws that apply to you, and then you go from there. That could be one way of building up a list of your requirements. Another is your business needs and priorities. Now, what this means is, let's say you are a fintech organization, the level of security that is not only expected, but even what is necessary for a fintech organization is way higher than an organization that does not, for example, deal with a lot of sales personally identifiable information. um, you should become the judge as to know what is the level of security that you should be targeting, depending on what is your business, what is your business model, what exactly are the needs of security as far as your industry goes, right? So you can make a comparison with other organizations of, from your own domain, or your own industry. Maybe you can refer the legal and regulatory mandates and use that as a framework for deciding that what exactly are your business needs and priorities. Besides that, let's say you can conduct your own risk assessment, and two organizations that conduct the risk assessment, they arrive at the same level of risk applicable to them, but then the two organizations can independently decide the risk acceptance criteria, which is how much is the risk that you are willing to accept. An organization may be willing to accept more risk. Obviously that is not a good practice, but then maybe you have got budget constraints, maybe you feel that at this point in time security is not something that you want to focus on, while another other organization may say that no, security is something that is extremely important to us, and we have to prioritize it to the same extent as we are prioritizing, let's say, our sales needs, right? So again, you become the decision maker as to what exactly are your business needs and priorities, depending on your context. And then finally, um, you may decide whatever it is that you wish to decide. There may be regulations that are specifically applicable to you, or regulations that even do not apply to you. But ultimately, your stakeholders will be the ones who will most likely be deciding that what exactly it is that you are going to target in terms of your security. Now, stakeholders are many. Other than the regulatory and legal bodies, you have your internal stakeholders. Your sales team, for example, is a very big stakeholder for the security function, and this is something that I've been seeing change rapidly over the past few years, where the security function actually kind of becomes a support function for the sales team, because increasingly what is the change that is happening is that larger enterprises, they do not even allow a new deal to be signed up, new agreement to be signed up with an external supplier, unless and until the supplier has undergone their security due diligence. And they will end up asking questions to you. They will conduct a security audit on you, and these security audits will be based on the same aspects that I have spoken already, or will be speaking later in this webinar. But then, unless until you clear that audit, they will not give you the go ahead. As in, their security team will not give a go ahead to their business team to go ahead and sign the agreement. And effectively speaking, not only is the work of your clients stuck, because the integration is not progressing forward, but also your own revenues are being impacted, and revenue being a very important factor for sales. So ultimately you become a customer, a provider to your sales team, right? So this is just one example of the stakeholders. Your clients are naturally your stakeholders, your senior management are your big stakeholders, and then the regulatory bodies, as I have said earlier, right? Having said that, let's start getting into the specifics as to what exactly are the source of requirements, where exactly your checklist, your security audit requirements come from. So you can group them into these three primary ones, which is regulatory, standards, or frameworks. Now, it depends on your context, it depends on your focus areas as to what exactly are the regulations that apply to you. It is entirely your choice which standard you want to comply with. But then sometimes this choice gets limited because your clients may end up mandating you to become compliant to a certain standard. And as far as frameworks go, it is completely up to you that what are the frameworks that you want to apply to yourself and to your organization in terms of security. But then at a high level, These are the usual ones that you will see will be expected by the regulatory bodies or your clients, or maybe your own choice, depending on what is it that your focus area is. The first and foremost and the most common one is ISO 27001, which is the information security standard. This is something that I call it as like the baseline security standard that any organization should comply with. Now, because it is something that is designed for the sake of being applicable to a wide range of organizations across multiple industries, it kind of resulted into a relatively simpler standard to comply with. And when I say simpler, it is because if, let's say, the standard became too specific, then it would not be able to be applicable to a wide range of organizations. So it was kind of by design. But then it does not mean that it is something that is easy to comply with. ISO 27001 standard is a reasonably difficult standard to comply with. There are very specific expectations. To some extent, even security domain knowledge is kind of a necessity to implement this standard, because the standard is written in a way that is easily understood by security people, but then it is not easily understood by someone who's not from the security domain. uh, Going forward with this ISO standards, there are several more that you could choose from. Now, before I actually read them out and give you a brief explanation, I would like to point out that all of the ISO 27000 series standards, they require that you be ISO 27001 certified first, meaning they are an add-on certification standard. They cannot be obtained independently, meaning to say that unless and until you are ISO 27001 certified, you cannot obtain ISO 27701 certification, which is for privacy information management. Similarly, is the case with ISO 27017, which is meant for cloud security, and 27018, which is for cloud privacy. You should consider these standards if you are, let's say, a cloud-based SaaS provider, which a vast majority of the organizations are these days. Other than that, PCI DSS. So if you are a fintech and if you are saving, storing, processing, transmitting card information, it could be debit cards, it could be credit cards, even it could be wallets, which are considered as pseudocurrency these days. Then ideally you should be choosing PCI DSS. In any case, what will end up happening is that if you are storing card information, and let's say you are a merchant, most likely you will not be permitted to carry out your business function unless and until you get yourself PCI DSS certified. And PCI DSS is a very, very specific and narrowly focused standard on those organizations that uh, are involved with card information in one way or another. And which is why, in contrast to ISO 27001, PCI DSS is not only much more difficult to comply with, it is also very much demanding. It is extremely stringent. The methodology that is followed for PCI DSS compliance is not random sampling based. It is something that requires you to be 100% compliant with each of the requirements. And by contrast, I mean, when the ISO 27001 audit is conducted, you undergo a random sampling audit, meaning it is not possible for your certifying body, your external auditors, to audit you on all of the standards, all of the requirements. So there are 114 requirements, 116 clauses. It is not possible for the auditors to check each and every aspect. So that is why they will randomly choose the important aspects and make an assumption, make an extrapolation from there, that okay, if you are complying with these aspects, then most likely you are complying with the other aspects as well. Whereas PCI DSS does not follow that method. When it comes to PCI DSS, the audit is much longer in duration, because the auditor will ask each and every aspect. They will gather evidence on each and every aspect, and those evidences are required to be submitted to the PCI DSS certifying body. It is the methodology that has been decided to be different, and there is good reason behind it. The reason being simple, that PCI DSS is all about financial security, and financial breaches are way more serious, way more damaging, and there are much more regulatory effects and consequences and impacts on the organization that happen to be breached because it was not complying with the PCI DSS standard. Moving on to the next one, which is SOC 2. In my observation has been that, first of all, SOC 2 does not really prescribe that what is the standard that you wish to follow. You can choose any standard, but then there are definitely some trust principles, and the trust principles are the same five, which is confidentiality, integrity, availability, security, and privacy. But then the expectations of SOC 2 auditors are, we could say that, they are along the lines of ISO 27001. So if let's say that you want to get yourself SOC 2 certified, and there is no real certification per se, but then you get something called as a SOC 2 report, which details out as to what exactly are the levels of security that you have managed to achieve. It details out that which are the trust principles that you are currently adhering to. You have implemented them in the organization and they are functioning as expected. But then if you get into the details of SOC 2, you will end up realizing that there is quite a bit of similarity between ISO 27001 standard and SOC 2, right? So these are the standards. I have added some regulations here. There are a long list of regulations, but then the most prominent ones are these two, depending on which region you are serving, what kind of business model you have. EU GDPR is something that is said to be applicable worldwide if you have got even one European national as part of your customer base. But then, why I mention EU GDPR is that other than the fact that it was the very first regulation that came about, which was quite comprehensive and quite in depth and quite demanding, the other thing that I'm noticing is that you pick up any new regulation that has come after the EU GDPR, and you will see that it follows the exact same trust principles that are principles that are expected by EU GDPR. So you, whether you take up CCPA or whether you take up Indian PDPA or even the much prior existing Singapore PDPA, which was actually is older than EU GDPR, they all tend to follow the same principles that you are expected to comply to these aspects if you want to be considered to be a secure organization, right? So that is regulatory. The one other subset that I want to focus on in terms of regulation is HIPAA, which is meant for healthcare security. Now here, what I noticed is that the expectations of HIPAA are exactly the same as ISO 27001. But the only difference that I noticed between HIPAA and any of the certification standards is, instead of calling PII, which is personally identifiable information, they call it PHI, which is personal health information. Other than that, the expectation of US, and by the way, HIPAA is something that applies to the US region alone, because it is a US regulation. So if you have got a healthcare uh, startup, which is something that is focusing on India, then HIPAA is something that will not apply to you. But that does not mean that you should not at least evaluate yourself against this regulation, because it is very good regulation, and there are some tweaks or additional differences from all of the other standards I noticed in HIPAA, which are focused on privacy to an extent that privacy has to be under the control of the data principal, the individual whose data it is. And the reason for that is because PHI is considered to be far more sensitive and far more damaging if a breach happens, versus PII, which has got its own serious impacts. But then it is, and there is some level of sensitivity also involved with PII, specifically when we are talking of financial data. Financial data has got a financial impact of its own. But then when we talk of PII, we usually refer to our full name or our email address or our mobile number, which are more of communication aspects or identity aspects, right? That is why personally identifiable information. The impact of PII loss or breach is a notch lower than PHI. Because if, let's say, I have got a certain ailment and that ailment is of sensitive nature and it leaks out, the problem is that it could have an impact on my life itself, like the life I'm leading, right? So which is why there is some amount of focus in HIPAA where privacy is given a little bit more priority than security. And I'd like to highlight here that security and privacy, although they are used interchangeably, they are not the same things, right? So to explain the in the simplest manner, security protects your data, privacy protects you, right? And why this distinction is necessary is because it is possible that your data may leak out, but still your privacy may be somehow be protected, because maybe the data that leaked out did not involve aspects of privacy. And even the reverse can happen, that your privacy is compromised, but the security that the organization follows is of high standard. Now this may sound extremely counterintuitive, to some extent even controversial, but it's a fact that organizations should not be focused on security. So when we talk of security audits, we are not talking of security audits focused on security alone. We are talking on aspects such as privacy as well. And in fact, here is where SOC kind of is among the best, as far as my opinion goes, because SOC clearly distinguishes the trust principles that are there, and security and privacy are listed separately. Not only that, but then confidentiality, integrity, and availability are also listed as separate trust principles. Now what I explained just now, in fact, kind of is mirrored in the fact that, look at the ISO standards themselves. There is a 27001, which is the information security standard, and then there is an add-on standard, which is privacy management, which is 27701. 27017 is about cloud security, 27018 is about cloud privacy. You can see that security and privacy, although they are related to each other, they are not exactly the same, right? And this is where HIPAA is somewhat different as a regulation, as far as my observation goes. Now, these were examples of standards. As I said, regulations are mandatory on an organization. If they apply to you, they apply to you. You cannot escape them. You have to comply with them. Um, Standards are maybe your choice, may not be your choice. Maybe your clients are mandating that unless until you have hold this particular certification standard, we will not do business with you. But then there is a third part, which is frameworks. These frameworks are completely your choice. And the one I always profess about is the CSA Star CAIQ version 3.1, which is the current version. What this framework does is that it is an open framework, so you can go ahead and freely download their questionnaire and start evaluating yourself against it. The best aspect about this framework is that um, it is an amalgamation, a combination of multiple standards and frameworks grouped together, compared against each other. And then the questionnaire has been prepared in such a manner that if you comply with CSA Star CAIQ, to a great extent, you will comply with all of the standards and frameworks. And in fact, there are some regulations as well. So what is the benefit here is that each of the standards or regulations or framework that you choose, they may be strong in a certain way, they may be weak in another way, depending on what exactly is their focus, what is it that their requirements and expectations are from your organization. What CSA Star does is it puts them all together and gives you one single checklist that if you comply yourself against, automatically you become compliant with multiple standards, regulations, and frameworks, right? So this is a very beautiful framework that I have seen, and I strongly recommend that if, let's say, you are conducting your own internal self-assessment and you're not really targeting to become compliant with a standard, and assuming that you have conducted a self audit on the regulatory aspects that apply to you, then the CSA Star CIQ is a very good framework to begin with, right? Having said that, let's look at the various types of audits that are conducted. Now, this depends on a lot of factors. Mm, who is conducting the audit? What are their primary drivers? What are their expectations from you? What is the framework that they are using, or reference or source that they are using to conduct an audit? Are they internal? Are they external? Are they external auditors? Depending on a lot of factors, the specific audit that is being conducted can be classified into so many types. And depending on the kind of audit that you're undergoing, the level of detailing, the level of expectations, the duration of your audit, the amount of evidence that you need to gather and submit, all of these factors change. And to get into the details of each one of them will be kind of difficult to conduct in a workshop, but then I try to explain to you at a high level what each one of these mean. The first one obviously is the compliance audit. Compliance audit is something that is focused on a standard or a regulation, right? Now, there are differences in compliance audit when it comes to standards and regulations. And typically, when we talk of a compliance audit, we are usually talking of a standard because, um, as far as regulations go, there is not a single certifying body that will sign off saying that you comply with a particular regulation. The reason is legal liability. That if they go ahead and sign off on your compliance with a particular regulation, and tomorrow a breach happens, and because of that regulation you are subjected to a penalty, you will be able to then um, take them to court saying that you are the one who signed off on our level of regulatory compliance, and evidently we were not compliant with it, and that is why you are liable for it. So which is why usually regulations, no one will sign off on you, which is which results into this outcome that when we talk of compliance audit, we are usually talking of standards, and we have already seen the standards. So ISO 27001, ISO 27017, ISO 27701, ISO 27018, PCI DSS, SOC 2, all of these you can categorize as compliance audits. The next one is internal audit. Internal audit is um, usually done for two reasons. One is that compliance related, or the other one is regulation. Now, what is the difference between the two is that, see, let's say you are targeting ISO 27001. You want to prepare yourself for the external audit. So what you will end up doing is that you will first of all obtain the standard, understand what the standard expects of you, and then you will evaluate the organizational systems, processes, people, whether they are complying with the standard or not. And if they are not complying, then you will prepare a list of gaps that you will end up having to close. You'll probably prepare a roadmap for that, and then you, once you're ready, then you will end up being satisfied. But then that is not it. ISO 27001 standard, or for that matter any standards based standard which is meant for the for security, has this expectation that you conduct an internal audit. And there is a difference between conducting a gap assessment and conducting an internal audit. The difference being, in a gap assessment you evaluate yourself against the entire standard, 100% of the requirements you evaluate yourself against, whereas an internal audit, you follow the same principle as the external audit, which is you conduct a random sampling audit, right? So depending on what exactly, which phase of your compliance are you in, you will follow different methodologies for your internal audit. And on the ground, an internal audit which is meant for conducting a gap assessment is not really considered an internal audit. But remember, audit is about testing your information systems. It is not necessary that you adhere to a particular methodology which is prescribed by a standard or a regulation or by your client. You are free to choose what you want to do. Your objective of conducting the internal audit is to meet the expectations that you're having and the needs that are there of the various stakeholders. So your methodology is defined by your needs and expectations, not by the needs and expectations of the standard, right? So which is why a gap assessment should also be considered as an internal audit. Alternately, as I said earlier, compliance audits are not meant to be considered as something that you get done by an external certifying body for regulatory compliance, because they will not sign off on your compliance for a regulation. The only option you are left with are only two of them, which is either you conduct a regulation oriented internal audit yourself, which is you pick up the standard, or sorry, the regulation, you go through all of the articles, the clauses, the statements, interpret them, understand what exactly is the expectation, and then you evaluate yourself against it. Or you hire someone, a security service organization, like say for example Numetric, and they will conduct this audit on you. But then at the end of the day, it will still be considered an internal audit, right? The only difference between a compliance oriented audit and regulation oriented audit is your source, your requirement. One is coming from a standard, the other is coming from a regulation. But otherwise, for all practical purposes, they are an internal audit, literally meaning internal to your organization. One important point to note, standards such as ISO 27001 or PCI DSS, or even regulations such as EU GDPR, they expect you to create proper records of your internal audits, meaning it is not something that you conduct and then you discard all of the data. You have to actually follow a certain specific methodology, prepare the report, The report has to follow a certain structure. It has to have all of the necessary elements. If not, then in that case itself, that itself will be probably marked up as a non-compliance. These are expectations of the regulations or the standards. So you should conduct an internal audit the same way an external audit is conducted, right? Moving on to client audit, this, in my experience, has seen the widest change, or rather the maximum change and the widest range of variations in the way the security due diligence activity is conducted. And the primary root cause of why client audits have increased rapidly in today's age is because of the high number of security breaches that keep on happening, the high volume of data that is lost, the fact that supply chain attacks have become a thing, and a large number of organizations now depend on systems and software provided by organizations that are outside their boundaries, meaning cloud-based SaaS providers typically, right? So all of this has resulted in security audits being conducted by clients uh, quite heavy in terms of volume, depth, breadth, the length, the duration for which the audits are conducted. And by far, these audits tend to be the most difficult to undergo. They are the most demanding, they are the most stringent. Frequently, these audits are also conducted by enterprise clients who have appointed well-known auditing firms, the big four specifically, who will conduct, so their security function will end up conducting an audit on you if you intend to become a supplier. And the one other major change that I've seen is that unless until you get a green light from the client security team being sent to their business team, you may not even be permitted to conduct a business. In terms of variation, I've seen a lot of variation. They sometimes rely on the standards, which is ISO 27001 or PCI DSS, but then frequently they have their own version of a self-assessment questionnaire or audit methodology that they have defined based on what they feel is important. Some of them will be more focused on data security, some of them will be focused on privacy, some of them will be focused on cloud security. It depends entirely on what your client expects. Although they resemble each other, I have not seen uh, that even two different audits based on the same standard or same framework, but belonging to two different clients, they can be called to be identical to each other. They usually have a difference in between the two of them. In addition to that, you will also expect that in the security due diligence phase, your organization will probably receive a set of clauses that are expected to be added to the contract agreement between the client and your organization. And these clauses are focused on security aspects, whether data security or data privacy or regulatory compliance, compliance to standards. They will actually spell it out that what exactly are the expectations. And frequently it so happens that if you're not doing something, but then you are actually signing off and undertaking some kind of an agreement that includes these kind of clauses, then you will be required to update your action task list, because you're not doing something till that point in time, but then a particular client is expecting, and this client deal is very important to you, so then you are required to start complying with it. And because you're signing off, um, compliance with that particular expectation automatically becomes equivalent to regulatory compliance, which is mandatory, something that you cannot escape, right? So these are the other kind of the most difficult kind of audits that you will undergo. A similar thing that I've observed is investor audits. But the focus area for investor audits is mostly risk based instead of security or privacy based. Because see, what happens is that if, let's say, someone is investing into your organization and you have not yet taken care of security to the extent that is necessary, and this results into that situation where your organization may be subject to a security breach or maybe some kind of a regulatory penalties because you have not complied with some things that are maybe considered basic or maybe considered important. An investor would not want to take that risk without accounting for it. So what will end up happening is that your valuation of the organization may go down if in case your the risk assessment of you, and specifically the security and privacy risk assessment of you, is poor. Alternately, what they may end up doing is that they may insist that you add the amount of budget that is required for becoming compliant to a standard or meeting certain regulatory expectations, and that increase in investment that is coming in basically reduces your stake in the organization. So one way or another, you're being negatively impacted when you undergo an investor audit, right? But then, as I said, their focus is risk based, so it is entirely a business decision rather than a security decision. But then the end consequence usually is the same, whether it is a client audit or investor audit. You will be required to take up certain actions that are necessary to boost up your level of security and improve your security posture. And then finally, supplier audit, which is increasingly becoming a thing now, which is the exact opposite of client audits. And in a client audit, your clients conduct security due diligence activity on you. In a supplier audit, you conduct security audit on your suppliers, because supply chain attacks can affect you as well. Besides that, most standards expect that not only have you taken care of security in your own organization, but you also monitor security or risk pertaining to your suppliers, because if a breach happens with them and your data is something that is provided to them, then in that case it is as good as the breach being faced by you. The difference here again is that you conduct your security audit not for the sake of security due diligence, your own security improvement, but then for the sake of risk mitigation. So in principle, compliance audit and internal audit, they are kind of related to each other, while client audit, investor audit, and supplier audit are kind of based on the same focus areas, right? So having said that, let's get to how to prepare for audits. When it comes to preparation for an audit, these are the four aspects that, if you think about, you should be well off. But then in theory, at least, as far as these 4 points go, they may look simple, but then I've observed that unless until you have got a dedicated set of team members, they may not necessarily be security team members, they may be anyone from any of the functions, but unless and until they have dedicated focus on the security function and preparing for the security audit, it is unlikely that you're likely to succeed. So these you should consider as mandatory requirements to prepare for a security audit. Unless and until you take care of these, you're not likely to succeed. And they are: first, you define your scope. We have spoken a lot about it. Your scope can be defined based on the standard that you're trying to comply with, maybe the regulations that are applicable to you. You can account for the needs and requirements of your stakeholders. Um, you can also decide that your scope is dependent, like, your scope could be dependent on which domain do you belong to, which industry you are serving, what kind of data you're collecting, what is the volume of data that you're collecting, where exactly your data is located, what are the technologies that you're using. Effectively speaking, your scope, needs, and stakeholders define your context. That context defines your needs for security, as in what is the level of security you need, what is the level of implementation that you've got to do, and what extent do you have to go to be able to say that you are reasonably ready, right? So that is the very first step. The second thing is that you prepare a security roadmap. In the security roadmap, there are several phases, and they are all challenging in their own way. So you should prepare a detailed roadmap beginning from day one till the time you get your security compliance. Maybe you obtain your certification, maybe you obtain your SOC report, maybe you sign off internally saying that, yeah, we are EU GDPR compliant. Maybe you meet the client's expectations, the client gives a go ahead. Maybe you reach a satisfactory level for CSA star CIQ. Entirely depends on which source, which framework, which standard, which regulation you are choosing to comply with. But the phases across your security roadmap, spanning your security roadmap, they remain the same. So what you end up doing is you prepare this roadmap starting from day one, going through all of the various hoops, implementation, internal audit, conducting your vulnerability assessments, your penetration testing, application security, logical security, people security, system security, all of those aspects. Then conducting a re-audit internally, calling the external auditors, whether they are clients or whether they are external auditors belonging to certifying bodies, and then undergoing the audit itself, meeting their expectations, and finally submitting a corrective plan if it is necessary. Right? All of these aspects should be part of your security roadmap. The next I told you, I already touched upon this topic earlier, which is the security team. It is not necessary that you have people from the security domain. Definitely it will speed up and reduce your cost of implementation, or being successful in the security audit if you have people from the domain itself. But then it is not really a necessity. Maybe your organization is not that big enough that you can allocate a separate budget for your security team. But then, without a security team who are given the roles and responsibilities and authorities for making the changes that are necessary to become compliant, you're not likely to succeed. So, having a dedicated set of team members who are able to spend a part or all of their time on security related activities, you're not likely to be able to get through a security audit. So, identifying a security team is very important. And just as any operational management aspect goes, when you have a roadmap, you should be conducting frequent progress reviews, because there are competing priorities from all of the various stakeholders, the people who are going to help you, and these are people who belong to various functions. They You will have expectations from them in terms of changes that they need to make, either in systems or in their processes or in their administration. And if you do not keep following up with them and keep a track and keep on reporting on their performance, you are highly unlikely to meet failure. So it is very important that you conduct progress reviews. And when it comes to, let's say, ISO 27001, for example, there is a entire clause dedicated to something called as management review meetings, which is MRMs, as we call them. And the whole purpose of this entire clause, and which has got several expectations, are the fact that you are constantly conducting these reviews against what are the needs of your organization versus where do you stand, and what are the gaps, and how exactly are you going to close them. And usually this management review meeting is presided by what we call as the information security council. You can call the steering committee or security committee, whatever its name you want to call it, but then it is usually made up of the senior most management of your team. Your CEO is usually the head of that particular team. So this progress review should be conducted with this particular team frequently, right? And unless until you do that, you are not likely to succeed in the security audit. Having said that, let us look at the very final aspect, which is what are the usual reasons that I have seen why failures in security audits happen. And again, there are four aspects that I have seen result into failures in security audit. One is that there are major gaps and weaknesses. I mean, these gaps and weaknesses are so big that no certifying body is likely to allow you to be certified, because it is their reputation at stake, or no client will sign up with you, or you are very likely to be experiencing a security breach at any moment, right? Because there are like glaring loopholes in your system. So this is one reason. And simplest thing is that because you just have not cared about security at all, you have only focused on the business requirements and the sales requirements. You're not cared about the security requirements while building up your organization. The second one is lack of senior management commitment. You can have all of the roadmap, all of the plans, the best intentions, but if your senior management is not supportive of your commitment to security, it's not going to happen. The very first thing that you do when you take up any kind of a security related activity is, first you get the buy-in of the security management, make them become your sponsors for all of the activities, and unless until that is in place, I would strongly recommend you do not even get started. There's no point in doing that. The next one is inadequate knowledge of security team. Now, as I mentioned, it is not necessary that people in the security team are from the security domain, but then even if they are people who have been picked up from the various functions, they will still need to understand the fundamentals of security, which means that they will have to do up some reading, and if they do not have the time or the inclination or the intent, they're not likely to be able to do that. It is very important that you get the right set of team members who not only are capable but also interested in learning about security, because security is a special domain of its own. It is not something that is easily understood by everyone, and not everyone is made for security. On the contrary, there are some people who are specifically meant for security. You need to pick those people. And if your level of knowledge of your security team is poor, naturally you should expect that your security implementation itself will be poor, right? Moving on to the next one, which is related to the second point, which is lack of senior management commitment. If you do not get senior management commitment, you will not get the necessary budget allocation for the resources. The resources could be, primarily it is money, in the sense that you will need to spend money on the people who are dedicated, the part of the security team. Their salaries are effectively your part of your security budget. um, you will have to implement security technologies, web application firewall, file integrity monitoring system, SIEM, IDS, IPS, network firewall, gateway level firewall, antiviruses for your endpoints, logging systems. So many systems you have got to implement. They itself cost money, and some of them cost a lot of money. Other than the salaries, your security technologies will cost money. Money has to come from someone, and the someone is going to be a senior management, right? So if that money does not exist, you cannot do anything about security. Other than that, other talking of other resources, if let's say even if you have formed a security team, but then they are not from the security domain, they are rather people from the various functions, and they're not able to spend the right amount of time for really implementing security to the extent that is necessary. So effectively, you have lack of time resources, right? You will not be able to get it done. So these are the various reasons that you could that could result into your failure of a security audit, whether the security audit is internal, external compliance audit, or it is a client audit, or it is an investor audit. Does not matter which kind of audit you're undergoing, you're likely to fail if these are the four things that you experience before you even get started, right? Having said that, let's start closing up the webinar, which is by going through the learnings from this workshop. First thing that we spoke about was we understood what exactly security audits are all about. There was a distinction between security audit and IT security audit or computer security audit. I also explained that security audits are something that span across multiple aspects of your organization: technical, physical, administrative, or systems, processes, and people. We went through the various purposes of audit, whether it is risk mitigation, identifying your gaps or weaknesses, preparing for a compliance standard, complying to a particular regulation, meeting client expectations. These are the various purposes depending on your context of your organization. The sources of your requirements could be regulations, or they could be standards that you want to comply with, or they may be specified by your clients and other stakeholders. The various types of audits: external audit or compliance audit, internal or self audit, which is either meant to be done as a gap assessment, or it is something that is mandated internal audit as specified by the standard that you're seeking out, or it could be a client or supplier audit. We also spoke about how to prepare for a successful audit and what are the usual reasons that security audits fail, why you do not succeed in getting a green light in terms of whatever audit that you are targeting, right? So having said that, let's move on to quickly go through the questions that may have come up. The thing is that I have ended up taking almost all of the time talking on the topic, so I'm not so sure whether we should be spending too much time on the questions. So I would rather prefer to wind up, because I believe that most of the aspects have been covered. But if there are any questions, then please go ahead and post them. See, Nematic is a cybersecurity services and products company, and we have been in this field for quite a long time. We are a bunch of professionals who hold various certifications. I myself hold four or five of them, prominent ones, and we provide help in terms of getting an organization ready for any kind of a compliance. We also provide organizations help where what ends up happening is that they are, let's say, a cloud-based SaaS organization or a fintech organization, and they frequently undergo client audits because of a regulatory mandate that the clients may have, or maybe the clients are concerned about the level of security that is implemented in the organization. So what we end up doing is that we end up taking their entire security function and we run the entire function. So if you have this kind of a need, then please do reach out to us. You can reach out to us at secure@numeric.com. Alternately, you can find the contact number that is posted on our website. We also take up technical security, which is, let's say, if you want to get vulnerability assessment or penetration testing done for your application, you may be just getting started off, or maybe you are a mature organization and you have not taken up this kind of an activity yet, but then maybe clients are expecting from you, or you want yourself to evaluate how well your application measures up against the the usual standards that we that are applicable to technical security. OWASP is the most common one for web applications, but then we do not focus on applications alone. We focus on mobile apps and your VPC environment, your network, your LAN, all of those aspects as well, as in all of the aspects related to technical security. So whether it is compliances, whether it is handling your security function, or whether it is evaluating security of your systems, we kind of do all of those things. So please go ahead and reach out to us if you need any kind of help. Right? Having said that, thank you for joining in, and see you next time.